On the night of April 14th, 1865, three men were supposed to die. Not one, three. Abraham Lincoln, Vice President Andrew Johnson, Secretary of State William Seward, all three. Same night, same hour. A coordinated strike designed to decapitate the entire United States government in a single evening. Most people know what happened to Lincoln. Almost nobody knows the full story of what was planned and what went wrong. This is that story. The Civil War was over, or close enough. Lee had surrendered to Grant just 5 days earlier at Appomattox. The South was broken. 4 years of the bloodiest war in American history was finally coming to an end. Washington was celebrating. The streets were loud. People were relieved in a way that's hard to describe, the kind of relief that only comes after years of fear and loss. But not everyone was celebrating. In a city full of Confederate sympathizers, spies, and bitter loyalists, one man was watching the celebrations with hatred in his eyes. John Wilkes Booth was a famous actor, handsome, charismatic, beloved by audiences across the country. He was also a devoted Confederate who believed Abraham Lincoln was a tyrant destroying the country he loved. Booth had been plotting against Lincoln for months, but his earlier plans, including a scheme to kidnap the president and hold him for ransom, had fallen apart. Now, with the war lost and the Confederacy dying, Booth decided that if he couldn't save the South, he could at least punish the men who defeated it. On the afternoon of April 14th, Booth learned that Lincoln would be attending a play that evening at Ford's Theater. He moved fast. Within hours, Booth had assembled a small group of co-conspirators and assigned each of them a target. Booth himself would kill Lincoln at Ford's Theater. A man named Lewis Powell, a former Confederate soldier, physically imposing and completely willing to kill, would go to the home of Secretary of State William Seward and kill him there. And a man named George Atzerodt would go to the Kirkwood House Hotel, find Vice President Andrew Johnson's room, and end it there. The plan was timed to happen simultaneously. All three targets, same night, same hour. If it worked, the United States would wake up on April 15th without a president, without a vice president, and without a Secretary of State. The hope was chaos. Confederate resistance reignited. A war already lost somehow reversed by a single night of blood. 3 men, 3 locations, 3 assassins. The clock started at 10 o'clock. At Ford's Theater, the play was already underway. Lincoln sat in the presidential box above the stage, relaxed, laughing. The crowd below had no idea what was coming. Booth knew the play well. He had performed there before. He knew exactly when the audience would laugh, and he timed his shot to the loudest moment so the sound of the gunshot would be swallowed by the crowd. At 10:15, he slipped through the door of the presidential box. One shot. Abraham Lincoln slumped forward and never regained consciousness. Booth leaped from the box to the stage, catching his spur on the bunting and snapping a bone in his leg when he landed. He limped across the stage, disappeared into the darkness behind it, and rode off into the night. The theater erupted. At the same moment across the city, Lewis Powell was already inside William Seward's home. Seward was bedridden, recovering from a serious carriage accident just days earlier. He was not a man who could defend himself. Powell fought through the household, bludgeoning Seward's son with a pistol, shoving past anyone in his path. He reached the bedroom. What followed was something between an assassination and a nightmare. Powell attacked Seward with a knife, slashing his face and throat in a frenzy before the family managed to wrestle him toward the door. Powell escaped into the night, leaving behind a scene that witnesses described as a slaughterhouse. By any measure, William Seward should have died in that room, but he didn't. A metal splint he was wearing to support his broken jaw, ordered by his doctor just days earlier after that carriage accident, deflected the blade at the critical moment. The wound was devastating. The survival was almost impossible. William Seward lived. That left one man, one target, one assassin. George Atzerodt had been given the simplest assignment of the three. Go to the Kirkwood House Hotel. Andrew Johnson was staying there. Find him. Kill him. Atzerodt had actually checked into the hotel earlier that day. He had been given a room 1 floor directly above the vice president. He had a knife. He had a pistol. He had a plan. And somewhere between 10 o'clock and midnight, George Atzerodt made a decision that changed the course of American history. He ordered a drink, then another. He wandered the hotel bar. He walked the streets. He rode around the city on horseback, going nowhere. He never went upstairs. Andrew Johnson went to bed that night with no idea that a man had been assigned to kill him, a man who had been sitting 1 floor above him, and had simply lost his nerve. By midnight, the conspiracy had partially collapsed. 1 target was dead. 1 had survived by a miracle of timing. 1 had been saved by a coward who couldn't finish what he started. Booth escaped Ford's theater on horseback. He would be hunted for 12 days before federal troops cornered him in a Virginia barn. When he refused to surrender, the barn was set on fire. Booth was shot, whether by a soldier or by his own hand has never been fully resolved, and died a few hours later. Powell was captured. So was Atzerodt. Along with several others connected to the conspiracy, they were tried by a military tribunal and hanged in July of 1865. The trial raised questions that historians still debate. Were the conspirators acting alone? Was Confederate leadership involved? Was there a larger network behind Booth that was never fully exposed? Those questions have never been definitively answered. 1 bullet changed everything, but 2 acts of fate changed just as much, and almost nobody talks about them. A broken jaw saved a Secretary of State. A glass of whiskey saved a vice president. History doesn't always turn on the moments we remember. Sometimes it turns on the ones we forgot to ask about. And that's the part that should keep you up at night.